When people think of Ohio State, their minds often go to football, academics, and the sheer size of Ohio State. But what people also often think about is our mascot, Brutus Buckeye. This video is going to be broken into 4 main sections: the origin of Brutus, his evolution, what the experience is like being him, and finally, what is next for the program itself. We'll look at what Brutus used to look like, but also we will look at how the experience has changed over the past 50 years of his existence. We'll be discussing with Bruti both old and new, as well as the ESPN-deemed Brutus historian Tracy Stuck from Student Life. Now let's get into talking about Brutus.
The origin of Brutus really came down to an Ohio Staters meeting. There was a probationary member, Ray Boris, and he actually brought this project to Ohio Staters and presented it. And at that point, Ohio Staters voted and said, this is a great project to move forward with. And they allocated him $50 to actually come up with a mascot. Ray at that point then got his college girlfriend, Sally Hubert Lannon, to actually participate. So the lore of Brutus is he was actually produced in the lawn of the Pi Beta Phi house, which would be on the corner of 15th and Indianola. And they worked on this project, and he was a huge paper mache nut. But at that point, there was no name to the nut. So Ohio Staters went back to work, and they created a naming committee. And people could apply at that point, and they would just put in a ton of names. The winner was Kerry Reed, and he put in Brutus Buckeye. He did that because he said the name it meant heavy and it was Shakespearean-like, and that it was an academic, part. And so that was actually voted on. Kerry won also a $50 gift card. At that point, Ohio Staters also realized just because we live in the state of Ohio, a paper mache nut was not going to make it very long in our season. So at that point, Ohio Staters, and in the minutes you can see, voted again for $200, and they created the fiberglass Brutus that was really the one that we know of as much today as the first original Brutus. The thing that you need to understand about that fiberglass nut is it was heavy, and it weighed over 50 pounds. And so the hard part with it is you couldn't keep it on very long. A lot of the pictures that you will see of Brutus Buckeye, it would be Brutus and a person standing beside. Then it lived really, with Blocko. Then in the 1973 season, Keith Burks, who would have been the first African-American Brutus, we had gone that year to the Rose Bowl. And Blocko couldn't afford to take Brutus. And so they had gone to the athletic department and said, please, will you help pay to take Brutus? And at that point, they said no. And the students signed a petition. They kind of protested. The whole community got involved and said, please take Brutus Buckeye to the Rose Bowl. So athletics reconsidered, and they paid to have Keith and the gigantic nut sent to the Rose Bowl. But in doing so, they said, then next year, the responsibility of Brutus Buckeye will come to the athletic department. So really from 1974 on, the athletic department and the Spirit organization, cared for and looked after Brutus Buckeye. But in turn, after they sent the big nut, the athletic department all got together and said, this is going to be, very expensive to send this nut to different places. So at that point, they had Brutus redesigned. And if you look at pictures, and this is the Brutus that people would describe as Popeye Brutus, and he appeared and he kind of had a growl and kind of a mean look to him. He appeared in the stadium. The first game, he was booed, and the second game, he was booed out of the stadium, and that mascot was never to reappear. So then they kind of went back to somewhat of the original, but this time they added the Woody Hayes hat to it. And he was a much friendlier looking Brutus. But once again, if you talk to people during that era who played the role of Brutus Buckeye, the hat was so large that they ended up falling forward a lot. So they spent a lot of time, once again, falling forward. And again, a heavy costume. Then athletics, they said, well, this has been, once again, a lot. It's really big to take to these away games. So then they had another redesign. And this was probably like in 1981. This time that redesigned Brutus, that it was actually like a feminine form of Brutus, and it looked like Brutus was a female at that point. But once again, I think that that costume, it really only lasted a year. And the redesign that happened right after that, probably from 82 on, is the costume that we know and love today.
Brutus, as we know, is more than just a figure in Ohio State history, but he's also a role that people play. We're going to talk to 5 past Bruti about what their experiences have been like over the many years that they have played the role. First, we're going to talk to 2 female Bruti. Sandy Glowacki Foreman, who's the first female Brutus back in 1977, and then we're going to talk to Emily Williams, who was the 3rd and most recent female Brutus back in 2001 to 2003.
Being the first female Brutus did put pressure on me because...
And I knew it would be an uphill battle being a female because Brutus himself is a male character.
We were pretty nervous about introducing a new Brutus and that a female was doing Brutus.
But that doesn't mean that it's just men that can try out. I could be a female underneath it all, but still portray a male character. But you can see where it would be a bit harder for a woman to do that.
We had Brutus run in and then run off, and the fans were fine.
So I knew that the odds were stacked against me going into tryouts, but I didn't care.
I have a lot of pride that I was the first female Brutus Buckeye. I felt like, I'm paving the way for other females in the future to become Brutus.
Because how would you ever know you're meant for the role if you don't at least go try out and give it your all? And that's what I did. I put my heart and soul into that.
Now we're going to dive more into the modern experience of being Brutus.
My name is Jordan Lukens.
My name is Ante Dejanovic.
I was Brutus Buckeye from 2017 until 2020.
2018 to 2020.
Freshman year, I actually joined the cheerleading team.
My junior year, I was doing backflips, things like that.
And I remember talking to my parents on the phone, and I could never see myself being Brutus.
And I met one of the cheerleading guys, and that was kind of like my little seed.
But then I tried out 3 years later.
Tryout, made it. Coach took a little risk with me, and that was that.
Being Brutus is a pretty once-in-a-lifetime experience, and so there are naturally some really awesome memories that one has from their time wearing the suit.
So I think that rounding the hospital as Brutus was another one of my favorite things, just because seeing the patient's expression on their face when Brutus walked in the room was really something else. But that really made me think, if I can do this much for a patient without even talking to them, how much could I do as their physician?
But definitely, it was in my second year when I hit my 50-yard field goal in front of the crowd. That was really pinnacle because I was working on it for 2 years, and you only had 2-3 minutes before the band would run down. So.
Yes, I met so many people. The highlight, I think, was Jesse Owens. I would see huge, life-size pictures of Jesse Owens on campus. And when he walked up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Jesse Owens," I couldn't speak really.
Now we're going to get an event-by-event walkthrough of what it is like being Brutus Buckeye on those Saturday football game days.
Football game for Brutus, I would wake up depending on when the game was, if it was at noon or a night game.
So we'll meet there for a noon game around 6 for Brutus. Generally, Brutus is there earlier than everyone else just because he has to be at multiple events before everyone even gets there, essentially. So we'll get there around 6 o'clock, we'll go over the schedule. Brutus will go out, do a couple events, picture opportunity, huge line, sometimes all the way around St. John. And generally, we have to pry Brutus from these people so that we can get over here to do the game.
Right before kickoff, about an hour before, we would get ready to do grassy knoll and then our entrance. And so we would run into the stadium and have the whole cheer team behind us walking and pumping up the crowd. Once you have the game starting, that's when the magic happens, right? So I love doing Ohio, so an OHIO around the stadium. That was definitely fun. And then once that was done, you had a whole game day, so however long that took, right?
An all-day event. I don't usually get home for a noon game until around 6 or 7. It doesn't really matter what time the game is. It's usually an all-day event. Night games are even worse because, then we're here over French Fieldhouse at noon for a 7 o'clock game. We're doing events for those 7 hours. Then we get over here, stay here till midnight, and then we get home and it's 1 o'clock. So then I'm just drained at that point.
Through my discussions, I have come to realize that the changes to the Brutus costume, purely for travel and logistical reasons, had unforeseen consequences in how Brutus would be able to interact and have an impact on the community and fans.
I would have loved to have been in the costume they have today, where you can actually walk through a doorway and go up in the stadium, and it just brings such a new thing to the Brutus arena.
I would definitely agree that the current costume allows for much more mobility, much more interaction with the fans, much more interaction with, the cheer team and the dance team, because now Brutus can do dances with the dance team because he's super mobile. He's able to do backflips, he can be a flyer for the cheer team. A lot of these things weren't accessible when Brutus was just one big nut. But now that he's a lot more mobile, we're able to move around a lot more.
Yet the changes to the Brutus program don't stop with the costumes, but they actually extend to one person because
we haven't had a head coach for that long.
If there's one single backbone to the Brutus program, it has to be
Ray Sharp.
My name is Ray Sharp. I am
the first and only
coach of the Brutus Buckeye program.
He's a phenomenal coach.
Transitioning from Brutus to coach, it was challenging at first, but as you continue to do it, it becomes a little bit more natural.
He's a great role model, and he's a great Brutus.
We're thankful every day to have Ray Sharp, believe me.
Ray Sharp has definitely risen the bar for the Brutus program, but that's not where the progress ends.
I would love to see the Brutus program continue hospital visits.
Just continuing to raise the standard, raise the bar.
That's something that I started, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart.
We've brought in a lot of infrastructure. The tricky thing about trying to build infrastructure is, things change constantly.
Another thing I would like to see the Brutus program do in the future is definitely get higher scholarship.
Fully funded.
And the fact that they have no off season.
And endowment from the university.
To me, it's a no-brainer.
There is no doubt in my mind.
They should be not worrying about academic costs.
Brutus deserves a full ride.
And not worry about working a part-time job afterwards.
We need to keep building on that endowment fund, because once that hits a certain mark, then that will be the full rides that we need moving forward.
Now, the next logical step is answering the how. How does one become Brutus? So I asked for some tips and tricks, and this is what I gathered.
If somebody approached me and asked how they could be Brutus,
I would tell them,
go for it.
It is an amazing time.
Try not to come in with this preconceived notion that you have to be something that you're not.
Find what you think you could bring to the table that would really elevate Brutus.
We want people who are
in shape,
passionate, and want to bring Brutus to life as themselves.
There would be a huge void in my life if that didn't take place.
Trust that if you do make the team, that you're going to be equipped to succeed.
It is an amazing time, something that I would not trade for the world.
Working on this project over the past semester has really opened my perspective on the costume nut that we all know and love. And it has surprised me to discover how far the Brutus program has come since its creation in 1965. And also, it has surprised me to see how much experience has evolved over those 50 years. Yet what does not surprise me is how loved our mascot is. The always smiling and energetic Buckeye has always captivated fans, whether he was 35 pounds of paper mache, a female underneath, or without a coach. Yet the road does not end here. Brutus will continue to grow and improve and get better and better with each coming year. Brutus will also stay the same. He is the one constant here at Ohio State. Presidents, students, and faculty come and go as the years roll by. But Brutus has always been there, and he will continue to be the great mascot he always has been.